as Apple and gaming don't really go into the same sentence. In fact, they almost sound like the polar opposites. Like, of course, if you want a computer for gaming, you get a gaming PC. And on the other hand, people that have a MacBook are immediately thought of as the ones that do strictly work on their machines. Needless to say, you can of course have a Windows computer as the workstation, but it can also always be used for gaming as well, simply because it's just way more optimized. So you always have those two options. Meanwhile, if you're deep into the Apple ecosystem, the only way to legitimately play games is if you buy a separate console. Well, until now. Kind of. Is Apple trying to make the new Apple TV more than just a streaming device? Let's find out. First of all, I want to start by saying that this is, in my opinion, by far the most underrated Apple product of 2022. It came out at the very end of the year without any event or big announcement, alongside the new iPad and iPad Pro. But while those two were some of the least exciting updates of the year, alongside the regular iPhone 14, they definitely took the spotlight away from this amazing tiny device. The gap between the last two Apple TVs was 4 years, while now they released the new one after only a year and a half. And in this upgrade, they did all the right moves. They lowered the price for 30%, which is so unusual for Apple to do. So it's $129 now, and that is now way more in line with other streaming devices like Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire Stick, or Roku that are all below $100. But for this price, it does way more than any of those other ones. And of course, like any other Apple product, the deeper you are into the ecosystem, the better the integration gets. Aside from the seamless AirPlay from my phone or my laptop, which I now occasionally even use to study or read something, you can also pair your AirPods to it for a cinema-like experience that comes in handy, especially late at night. And yes, you can also use multiple pairs of AirPods to watch with your friends, just like you can share audio on the iPhone. But those are all the things you could still do before. Let's go back to all the amazing changes that they made. The first thing I want to talk about is the physical redesign. The remote now finally has a USB-C port instead of the Lightning, so you can finally start seeing Apple committing to make that transition with all their devices and accessories. They did it on all the iPad models over the last couple of years, so hopefully this year is going to be AirPods, Magic Mouse and Keyboard, and of course iPhone. Yet another smart move that they made is removing the Ethernet port altogether, because the device is gonna sit near the internet router anyway, like it does in my case. But you can, if you want, go for the more expensive model that has the Ethernet port and 128 gigs of memory. The device itself is now even smaller than it was, coming up at less than 10 centimeters squared, and it also weighs around 50% less, so I got really surprised when I picked it out of the box. It's almost like a plastic toy that you could totally put and carry inside your pocket. On the total contrary to the gaming consoles that are becoming bigger and bigger, this appears from your view almost entirely when you put it alongside the TV. But in such a small box lays a pretty remarkable power for a device like this. And we've come to the main focus of this video. For $50 less, they increased the storage 2 times, so it now starts at 64 gigabytes, and they also changed the chip itself for 3 generations ahead. So it's now the A15 instead of the last year's A12. Let's appreciate for a moment how big of a jump that actually is. And even though they removed one CPU core, which is kinda weird, so it's now a 5-core CPU instead of the regular 6 that goes into the iPhones every year, everything feels blazing fast. There is no lags, whether I'm in a game or swapping through apps, but that was all the same for the previous model as well. So it begs the question, why? Why would Apple want to put such a power in a streaming device? The power of still one of the best smartphone processors in the world, and on top of that, 128 gigabytes of memory on a streaming device. Unless they want to lay the groundwork for expanding more and more into the gaming as well. As hardware devices improve year over year, you can use them for longer than ever before, and Apple knows this. That's why they started relying more on the subscription models, which is becoming a bigger and bigger part of their revenue each year. Aside from focusing more on Apple Music, Fitness Plus, Apple TV Plus, there have also been lots of rumors going around of a potential acquisition of a big video game production company like the EA, which could potentially then merge with Apple Arcade in a big way. Imagine being able to play all the big video game titles like Apex, FIFA or Battlefield all on a tiny device like this. And all that with just the Apple Arcade subscription, so only $5 a month. I think people would be lining up to get something like this. Now, there is still a long way to go with optimizing those games that are made for PCs and consoles, but when it comes to power requirements, there are already lots of arcade games that are running at 4K 60 FPS very smoothly. So like with everything else in the Apple ecosystem, if it gets optimized, it would require way less power than on the Windows machines. I noticed this the most just recently, from editing in Premiere my whole life to Final Cut, and it's really night and day difference. On my fanless M1 MacBook Air, I'm able to edit 4K 60 footage and scroll through it in real time without any hiccups whatsoever. But while that whole thing is still up in the air, like I mentioned, there are still some pretty cool games that you can play on arcade right now, like The Pathless, which is an amazing RPG adventure, or some other very interesting multiplayer and single-player ones. But hands down my favorite one is still Asphalt 8, which I already pretty much completed in like under a month of playing casually. I guess you could say I prefer these kinds of games since my favorite game of all time is still Need for Speed Most Wanted, the one from 2005. The graphics in Asphalt are just incredible considering it's a phone game primarily, and it really shows while playing on the big screen. You can become super immersed while driving, and it's one of the games that you don't need a controller for. So you drive with just a remote, but it doesn't really require any time for getting used to. It's very intuitive and it becomes fun immediately. And while that is the case with this game, for some other ones not so much. You just need a controller to fully enjoy the game, even though it's clear they try to stretch using the remote for as many of them as possible. But I really don't see Apple making their own controller or including one with the TV, at least not anytime soon. So the obvious downside is needing to buy a separate one if you don't already have it, which already feels like a thing not a lot of people would do. So if Apple actually wants to push this whole gaming thing through, they still need to do something about making it feel more like a genuine console, and introduce as well as optimize at least some of the big and popular video game titles, which I'm crossing my fingers they will deliver in the next few years. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm so happy that we're building such an amazing community. Hit the subscribe button so we can reach 1000 subs as soon as possible, and like and share this video with someone. Thanks for watching.